August 15, 1947. India gains its independence after nearly 2 centuries under British rule. But the subcontinent isn't celebrating together. It's splitting apart. On one side, India. On the other side, a brand new country, Pakistan. What should have been a triumphant moment of liberation became one of history's most traumatic divisions. Families torn apart, trains arriving full of corpses, over 15 million people on the move, and nearly 2 million dead in the chaos that followed. Why did this happen? Was it unavoidable? Who made the decisions that carved borders with ink but spilled blood in their wake? The story of the partition of India is one of colonial missteps, religious tensions, political maneuvering, and resilience. In this episode, we dive into the roots of the partition, the horrors of its unfolding, and the echoes that still shape South Asia today. This is not just a history lesson, it's a human story, and it begins long before the first border was drawn. Seeds of division, colonialism, identity, and the road to conflict. The roots of partition reach deep into the soil of British colonialism. In the early 1600s, the British East India Company established a foothold in the Indian subcontinent. By the mid-19th century, following the crushing of the 1857 Indian Rebellion, Britain had assumed direct control over India. What followed was nearly a century of imperial rule, marked by both development and division. India was never a monolithic entity. It was a mosaic of religions, languages, castes, and ethnicities. Under British rule, however, these differences were not just acknowledged, they were emphasized and manipulated. The British practiced what came to be known as the policy of divide and rule. It was a way of ensuring imperial control by accentuating communal identities, especially between Hindus and Muslims. Census categories, education policies, and electoral structures all hardened these divisions. The 1909 Morley-Minto reforms, for example, introduced separate electorates for Muslims, allowing them to vote only for Muslim candidates. While intended to protect minorities, it entrenched communal thinking. At the time, the Indian National Congress emerged as a powerful voice for Indian self-rule. Founded in 1885, the Congress was dominated by Hindu leaders but often claimed to speak for all Indians. Many Muslims felt underrepresented, leading to the formation of the All India Muslim League in 1906. Tensions simmered. In the 1920s and 1930s, as Congress intensified its demand for independence, Muslim leaders like Muhammad Ali Jinnah began to fear that a future independent India would be a Hindu-majority nation where Muslims would be marginalized. Though Jinnah had once been a staunch advocate for Hindu-Muslim unity, over time his views shifted. In 1930, poet-philosopher Muhammad Iqbal articulated the idea of a separate Muslim homeland in the Northwest. The idea remained largely theoretical until the Lahore Resolution of 1940, when the Muslim League formally called for independent states for Muslims in the northwestern and eastern zones of India. Still, many believed unity was possible. Gandhi preached harmony, and Nehru envisioned a secular India, but the political reality was becoming increasingly polarized. World War II further complicated matters. Britain dragged India into the war without consulting Indian leaders, prompting Congress to launch the Quit India movement in 1942. The British responded with mass arrests. Meanwhile, the Muslim League supported the British war effort, hoping to strengthen its bargaining position post-war. By 1945, the war was over. Britain was bankrupt and exhausted. The pressure to decolonize was immense, and with the Indian independence movement at full tilt, the question was no longer whether Britain would leave, but how. And that's when the real crisis began. The line is drawn. Decisions, deadlines, and Mountbatten's race against time. In February 1947, British Prime Minister Clement Attlee made an announcement that set the countdown ticking. Britain would leave India no later than June 1948. With this deadline, the question of how to transfer power became a scramble. Could a united India emerge, or would partition be inevitable? Lord Louis Mountbatten was appointed the last Viceroy of India with a singular mission: to get Britain out with as little mess as possible. But the situation was already unraveling. Talks between the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League broke down rapidly. The Muslim League, under Muhammad Ali Jinnah, insisted on the creation of Pakistan as the only way to protect Muslim interests. Congress leaders Jawaharlal Nehru and Vallabhbhai Patel opposed dividing the nation, but could not agree on a formula that guaranteed power sharing without majority rule. Communal violence in Bengal and Punjab exploded in early 1947. The Calcutta killings of 1946 and the Bihar and Noakhali riots had already exposed deep religious divides. Now, massacres became more frequent, deadlier, and more organized. British authority eroded as civil services faltered, and public safety became an illusion. With time running out and blood running in the streets, Mountbatten moved up the timeline. He pushed the date of British withdrawal from June 1948 to August 15, 1947, less than 6 months from his arrival. The British devised a partition plan, which was accepted by both Congress and the Muslim League under immense pressure. The Radcliffe Boundary Commission, chaired by Sir Cyril Radcliffe, an English lawyer who had never been to India, was tasked with drawing the borders of the new nations. Radcliffe had just 5 weeks to complete the job. Working in isolation, Radcliffe was tasked with dividing nearly 2.5 million square miles and close to 400 million people, based on outdated maps, patchy census data, and limited knowledge of religious demographics. No detailed instructions, no time to visit villages, no understanding of the cultural and emotional ties people had to their homes. On August 14, 1947, Pakistan was born. On August 15th, India was born. The borderline Radcliffe drew wasn't even released publicly until 2 days later. By then, millions of people were already on the move, guided only by rumor and hope. Radcliffe quietly left India on August 17th, burning all his papers. He never returned. What he left behind was a line that would divide not just land, but hearts. It separated neighbors, friends, and even families, and it triggered one of the largest, bloodiest human migrations in history. Rivers of blood, the violence, migration, and survivors of partition. The ink on independence was barely dry when the exodus began. From Lahore to Amritsar, Dhaka to Calcutta, millions took to the roads, not in celebration, but in desperation. They packed their lives onto carts, trains, and their backs. Hindus and Sikhs fled Pakistan for India. Muslims fled India for Pakistan. What unfolded in the weeks and months after partition was not just a relocation, it was a bloodbath. Estimates suggest that nearly 15 million people were displaced, and between 1 and 2 million people died. It remains one of the largest and deadliest mass migrations in human history. Entire trains disappeared, only to re-emerge days later, filled not with passengers, but corpses. The infamous ghost trains became symbols of the sheer brutality of partition. One such train, leaving New Delhi for Lahore, was found with hundreds of bodies, all brutally murdered, not a single survivor. Massacres swept through Punjab, Bengal, and beyond. Villages were razed, women were abducted, raped, and trafficked in horrifying numbers. Historian Urvashi Butalia estimates that tens of thousands of women were kidnapped or assaulted during the turmoil. Many were never reunited with their families. Some were taken across the new borders and married off. Others were rejected by their own communities when they returned. But amidst this chaos, stories of courage emerged. In a village in Punjab, a Muslim man named Abdul saved 40 sick women and children by hiding them in his home for weeks, pretending they were relatives. In return, when violence reached his own family, a Sikh community helped him escape with his children to safety in Pakistan. The migrations were often fueled not by state planning, but by fear and rumor. Communities panicked at the slightest threat. Stories of slaughter elsewhere triggered preemptive strikes. People killed to avoid being killed. Mobs ruled, and in many places, local police either stood by or joined the violence. Refugee camps sprang up in Delhi, Karachi, Lahore, and dozens of other cities. Overcrowded, underfunded, and undersupplied, these camps became both sanctuaries and nightmares. Disease spread, children went missing, food was scarce, and yet people endured. An elderly man who walked from Rawalpindi to Amritsar with only a goat and his grandson. A teenage girl who lost her parents and 3 siblings on the journey, but later became a schoolteacher in Delhi. These stories, often passed down orally, form the emotional backbone of partition's legacy. India and Pakistan, both newborn nations, struggled to absorb the shock. The Indian government set up the Ministry of Relief and Rehabilitation, which processed over 7 million Hindu and Sikh refugees. Pakistan, dealing with its own refugee crisis, housed over 7 million Muslims pouring in from across the border. but the scars would remain. For many survivors, the partition was not just a historical event, it was a personal apocalypse. Homes were lost, families were broken, trust was shattered. Aftershocks, long-term consequences and lingering. The dust had not yet settled in 1947 when the new reality began to sink in. India and Pakistan, though free, were battered. The trauma of partition didn't stay in refugee camps or newspapers. It etched itself into every layer of society, from politics to art, from education to the very idea of identity. One of the immediate consequences was political instability. Both countries were in flux. In India, leaders like Nehru faced the monumental task of nation-building. The constitution had to reflect the ideals of a secular, pluralistic state while managing the grievances of millions who felt abandoned or victimized. In Pakistan, Jinnah became the country's first governor-general, but his sudden death in 1948 left a power vacuum that would haunt the nation for decades. India emerged with democratic institutions, but was constantly challenged by the aftereffects of communal strife. Pakistan, originally envisioned as a homeland for Muslims, struggled to define its national identity. Was it secular, Islamic, or something in between? Another lasting consequence was Kashmir. When the Maharaja of the princely state acceded to India, it sparked the First Indo-Pakistani War. The UN intervened in 1949, but the region remains disputed to this day, a flashpoint for multiple wars and a nuclear standoff. The legacy of the partition of India also shaped foreign policy. India adopted non-alignment, focusing on self-reliance and staying out of Cold War alliances. Pakistan aligned more closely with the United States and later China, seeking support against India. On a cultural level, the separation had profound impacts. Shared traditions, music, food, language were torn apart. Urdu and Hindi, once fluid in their overlap, became politicized markers of difference. Cross-border friendships, romances, and artistic collaborations became rare, blocked by growing suspicion and visa restrictions. Films and literature grappled with the trauma. Writers like Saadat Hasan Manto captured the human cost with raw clarity, while Indian authors like Khushwant Singh explored guilt, survival, and reconciliation. Partition wasn't just history, it became a genre. Perhaps most tragically, partition institutionalized communalism. Political parties in both countries capitalized on religious sentiment, often fanning old flames for short-term gain. Pogroms in India, like the anti-Sikh riots of 1984 and the Gujarat riots of 2002, echoed the violence of 1947. In Pakistan, religious minorities faced increasing marginalization and persecution. And yet, hope persisted. In recent years, activists, scholars, and descendants of survivors have worked to heal the wounds. Initiatives like the 1947 Partition Archive have collected thousands of oral histories, preserving memory before it vanishes. Peace groups have facilitated cross-border dialogues, and educational curricula are slowly evolving to offer more balanced perspectives. But the road to reconciliation is long. Partition was not just a political act, it was a psychological rupture, and like all ruptures, it left scars that sometimes ache across generations. Conclusion: the partition of India was one of the most momentous and traumatic events of the 20th century. It marked the end of colonial rule, but also the beginning of new rivalries, ruptures, and reckonings. Nearly 15 million were displaced, up to 2 million dead, and millions more were marked forever by grief and survival. But history isn't just about what was lost, it's also about what we learn. Partition reminds us of the costs of division, the fragility of coexistence, and the resilience of those who carry the burden of memory. It challenges us to face the past, not to dwell in it, but to build a future where such a catastrophe is never repeated. India and Pakistan remain tied by blood, geography, and history. Their stories are forever entangled. The echoes of 1947 still shape who they are and who they might become, because some lines on a map never truly fade. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about India's history and its division into two distinct countries, check out our book, The British Raj, A Captivating Guide to the British in India. starting from the Indian Rebellion of 1857 to the Indian Independence Act of 1947. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.